Okay, we're live, guys. And thanks for joining me here at Downtown Book and Sound. And I'm the proprietor of Downtown Book and Sound. And I want to welcome everyone who's joining us today on our live stream with a special interview about the new book, Honor Thy Label. And the author is here. Excuse me. And the person who wrote the foreword, David Bronner, is here. And Gero Leson is the author joining us today. So thank you very much, both of you, for joining me here in the Downtown Book and Sound in I'm going to say sunny Salinas, California, because we've had some great rain today, but the sun's out now. So we're kind of excited about that. So I'm going to actually remove myself from this part so that, whoops, that's not what I want. I want to remove this one. So we're going to put you guys.
Yep.
Bam.
That worked.
Right. Hey, did I freeze?
No, you still seem pretty live.
Okay.
Trish is gone.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
I'll need to come on. I want us to be in this type, I think, but not with me there. No, that's not going to work. We're going to have to go back to this one. I'm sorry. So I guess we have to still have 3 people on here. So there's our little technical difficulty if you're starting out. So I wanted to ask you to start out with, what was the inspiration for writing this book?
All right, I guess I'll start on that. You know, since I'm getting a little older now, and since my father was a publisher, and since we've done a lot of pretty unique things over the last 15 years, so over the last 5 years, the idea came up, this is something we should talk about, because no other brands usually don't do this kind of work. And it's also, of course, a little bit of psychotherapy. You know, you go through your own life, in a way, the interesting parts. So I conspired with Ryan Fletcher, a good friend and our chief of PR at Dr. Bronner's. And we just thought we got to write a book about this. And he's been super skilled in first bringing an agent in that was eager to publish something on Dr. Bronner's, then a ghostwriter, because I wasn't going to get started myself. The process of writing a proposal, for instance, would have been too much administration for me. So this worked amazingly well. And Penguin picked up the book on first try, even paid in advance. That's pretty unheard of. So there was a lot of support. There was a lot of support from them. But to me, it was really telling the story in a non-scientific way. I'm a scientist. I have often written peer-reviewed papers, but nobody reads those, right? Nobody who wants to learn about Dr. Bronner's wants to know about specific details of regenerative agriculture, or how exactly do you make coconut oil. It's got to be narrative. And I hadn't done this before. So this was a great challenge to learn how to actually narrate stories and have some interesting content in there. But it was ultimately really to tell the story of the crazy company and its visionary approach to business, and then my own life. And there's just a lot of really interesting overlap, just the way we met, what drove me when I was a kid, and things like that. So here you have it. That's the package of what got me to do. Great opportunity. I had always thought of writing an autobiography, but nobody's going to read this. Right? So it was just to package it, to combine these 2 stories was the way to go. Lots of fun, but I won't do this again, I think.
So tell me, I noticed you have a little accent. Where are you from originally?
I'm German originally, and grew up just to, in the late 60s, and I was super motivated about anything that was an anti-system. Germany in the 60s still wasn't a place that had overcome the Third Reich all that well, right? And it was just in our face. And then you just grew your hair long and smoked pot and listened to crazy music, and it stuck with me somehow, right? And I grew up, and the hair got a little shorter, but ultimately none of my ideas really changed. I came to the US in order to get out of Germany for a little bit and further my education on the science side, but I always liked the applied. I like to take science into the real world, and this job does this par excellence, right? Everything I ever learned, I can use in this work, whether it's physics or environmental science, psychology. I still need to learn a little bit of accounting, but I can do numbers, right? So it's fantastic. This job is just demands everything I ever learned. So it's highly applied science in a way, but also learning or knowing how to deal with humans, which is the most interesting part of the work ultimately, right? It's all about people that you deal with, that you have to motivate, train, and enjoy their presence. So it's a real good package, the best I could ever hope for. And like I write in the book, I couldn't have imagined when I was, say, 16, 18, that I'd be able to take those skills and use them in a professional job and make a living and have that kind of an impact. This would have been a dream, but completely unrealistic when I was a kid. And I sure wouldn't have thought I can do this in a business. I would have thought, okay, I work for an international NGO or something like this. But to think that I can do this working in a family-owned business, I would have never even dreamt of this, because business was bad for me at the time. Like, you were on the left, business was bad, government was good sometimes. And all that changed over the last 30 years. Really interesting, and, something to learn.
And what brought you to the United States originally?
Oh, what one could say, well, I wanted to get a doctorate in environmental science and engineering, but the truth is, my wife and I had to get out of Cologne, because if you stay in the same place for 30 years, right, it just gets a little old, and it's really nice to remove yourself from your family and all the expectations that come with it. So this was just a great opportunity to just go somewhere else, not start a new life, take with you what you have, but learn what's there. And this country sure is a little different than Germany, with all its dark and bright sides. So it was really a change in life. My wife is an artist, same thing. She was just able to do things here she just wouldn't have done back home, like going to a gallery as a woman and show a portfolio. So to us, it was both getting out of Germany and not just taking the regular route. And this country has allowed us to do that, which we're super grateful for. Trish, you're muted.
Just
Okay.
mute.
Okay. It's you go in and out of mute. Okay.
I hit it like too hard and it went twice. Sorry.
Yeah.
So David, I'd like to ask you a little bit about the history of your family and how Dr. Bronner's soap actually in this company actually came into being. It would be really great to kind of hear the history about it, because I think a lot of people don't know this story.
Yeah, and just want to highly recommend reading Gero's book, which he does an amazing job of covering a lot of what I'm about to tell, and in fact helping us to discover and reconnect with our German Jewish soap making roots. So my grandfather, Dr. Bronner, his grandfather first started manufacturing soap in 1858 in a small southern German town of Laupheim in the Jewish quarter. In the basement it was basically a small soap factory, and my granddad came of age. He was born in 1908, and came of age in the 20s, was apprenticed under the guild system of the time to another soap making family. And his dad and two uncles were running the show, and it expanded the family operation quite a bit, and actually had a big factory in Heilbronn, a relatively big factory. Heilbronn is another German Jewish, southern German town. They lived in the Jewish quarter there, and it's kind of one of the manufacturing hearts of Germany, and still is today. And my granddad was clashing with his dad a lot, just kind of generationally. My granddad was a very intense guy from day one. Was very Zionist, and his dad didn't really want him mixing politics and soap, and so more out of, I think, generational clash and just wanting to forge his own path in life. He emigrated to the States in 1929. Hitler was around, but it wasn't, the eventual dimensions weren't yet clear of the fascism to come and the horror to come. And so that wasn't so much a motivation. So he landed in the Chicago, Milwaukee area. He was a consultant to the U.S. soap industry and helped design factories and launch products, and met and married my grandmother, Paula, and had 3 kids, including my dad, and I think 37. And in this time became increasingly desperate to get his family out. And his 2 younger sisters got out. Lottie ended up in a kibbutz, and then Palestine, now Israel, they got kibbutz. And when she was 16, and Louisa got out in 38 and became a chemist here, came to the States, was a chemist and then a professor of literature at UMass Boston. And all of them were desperate to get their parents out, but like a lot of bourgeois Jews, thought they were going to ride out the madness and stay till it was too late. The factory was Aryanized in 1940, I believe, and they were deported and died shortly after, or killed shortly after. Actually 42 and 44. Yeah. And then his wife, Paula, was in and out of hospitals and died, I think in 44 as well. I think my dad was very young. And so my granddad was going through just immense tragedy. And somehow his response to all this, and to the Holocaust, and to the horror and everything, is this mystical visionary insight that all faith traditions at their heart, at their best, when they're not making idols out of their beliefs and demonizing each other, that at their best, they're all pointing at the same transcendent source that we're all children of. And if we don't realize our transcendent unity across religious and ethnic divides, that the next Holocaust in a nuclear armed world, we're going to all perish. So we were all one and none. And he felt urgently called to go around lecturing on his peace plan and, urging people to, get over the, just kind of aggression and fear, and, just see the humanity in each other, and, be more compassionate and open. And we're all praying to the same God. And he's going around selling his natural Castile soap on the side based on his family recipe, which were by that point pretty out of fashion, because post-World War II, this is the advent of better living through chemistry and synthetic pesticides and plastics and fertilizers. And as far as body care went, these natural soaps were not in vogue anymore versus like more complex synthetic detergent-based products. But nonetheless, word was getting out. These are pretty gosh darn dang good soaps, and people started coming to get the soap more than to hear what he had to say. And for him, everything was the message. The soap was there to communicate the message. So that's when he put his message on the label. So that all one God, faith, moral ABC, for him, that was the whole point. And the company was a nonprofit religious organization, all one God, faith. And that's our corporate name today. The genius of it is you forget a magazine and you go in the bathroom and he's got you, so it was an effective way, really, really, really smart. And, with the rise of the counterculture and the hippies and the generation wanting to live simpler lives closer to the earth, rejecting this war machine that wouldn't stop, and this era of Silent Spring, Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, and birds are, all the songbirds are dead because we're blasting so much pesticides in our agricultural land. That's when the soaps just really, and here's a soap talking about peace and love, and you can biodegrades by the side of the river. You can wash your, hair dog dishes and not worry about it. So that's when it really took off. And and then became a staple of all health food stores. The IRS disagreed with his tax exempt status, and he was in bankruptcy. And my dad and my uncle Ralph, my dad and my dad Jim, my mom Trudy, my uncle Ralph entered at that point. and it's a complex, long story, and Gero covers it really well in there. But my granddad wasn't the best father, and my dad came up in a series of foster homes that granddad was financially supporting and checked in, but was pretty absent. So my dad associated all one God faith, like that whole thing with basically failing as a father, and so there was a lot of anger and difficulty. And my granddad was super intense, coming from the mountaintop all the time. But anyways, my granddad got Parkinson's and was like chilling out, and my dad had done a lot of work on his side and kind of working through his anger and really embracing his grandfather or his father again. And so it entered and helped right the ship, and the company exited as a for-profit from bankruptcy in the early 90s on sound financial footing. But we have this nonprofit DNA at the heart of everything we do, and we honor my granddad's vision with we cap our salaries 5 times our lowest paid position and dedicate our profits to making a better world in all kinds of ways. But I should cede the floor here to Gero, because we're here to talk about regenerative organic agriculture and our whole adventure setting that up. And Gero tells that story way better than me.
So thank you for telling a little bit of that background, because I think it's important for people to see that this didn't just come out of the blue, that there was something that was something in the kind of behind it all, that with the ethics, especially that the company is interested in. But the regenerative agriculture is what the book is really about, and how to get there with a sustainable and ethical supply chain. So if we could have thank you for telling us about this and about the book itself. So I'm gonna mute myself a little bit where you're.
No, you want. So Trish, you want us to go into why we started doing this crazy work in the jungle? So that's still David's show, right? So with this background at a company, you can picture what happened when the 3 grandsons took over, Mike and David, in around 2000, right? The father and grandfather had passed on, and then the question was, how do you? I hope I can speak for you, David, here. How do you really use his moral guidelines? How can you use those in the work you do? So, of course, the first round was deal fairly with your employees, right? And Dr. Bronner has been exemplary in that fashion, right? The wages paid and just the treatment as a family. Back then, it was still, a company with less than 30 people when I joined around 2005. And then the idea came up, where do our raw materials come from? They have to be produced in a way that provides benefits, social benefits to the farming communities, and also to the environment. So initially there was organic, there was the organic regulations under the USDA's National Organic Program. So Dr. Bronner started buying organic, and then swiftly recognized that it doesn't mean anything, or not too much, because the raw materials you buy are usually not grown. Definitely the coconut oil and palm oil are usually not grown with pesticides, herbicides, or even fertilizer, depending on where they come from. But you don't know this, right? You have no insight because your supply chain is long. And David had been bugging me. We've known through hemp. Industrial hemp is our connection. In fact, Dr. Bronner is a hemp-based company. We sometimes joke because we met late 90s through activism to promote industrial hemp as a resource. And then I had been working in Sri Lanka on an assignment for USAID, an American United States Development Agency, cocoa fiber industry. And then David said, hey, can you just look whether there's maybe organic fair trade coconut oil in Sri Lanka? But there wasn't at the time. Nobody was making fair trade anything other than coffee and cocoa. And then, we did a relief project after the tsunami in late 2004. Dr. Bronner's kicked in some money, and then David thought, maybe we have people on the ground. Why don't we just build a coconut oil mill, which was just organic and fair trade. So we wanted full transparency into the supply chain, and we wanted to make sure that there's benefits to the farmers who grow the coconuts, to their communities, and also that there is organic beyond not spraying. So this is how we started. And I was lucky enough to have good friends on the ground who also knew business, and I trusted. And this is when we started. So we actually built, this was a lot of fun. I had never done this before. So we recruited back then 500 farmers, converted them to organic, which is not so difficult in coconuts because most farmers neglect their trees. That's when I learned first. And then you build a factory, and I was lucky to have a whole set of German friends who knew architecture and who knew how to design equipment, etc. So I just made them volunteer their time, and this was a lot of fun. So we just had our 15th anniversary. We just met in Sicily with the entire group and just marveled at what we did. It was just a really nice experience, not without trouble. It was really brutal, and the Bronners always supported and had trust. So this was the first factory, and then it got worse from there, right? Then we built a palm oil mill in Ghana. Then we engaged in the production of organic and fair trade peppermint oil in India, and then we also collaborated with a project in the West Bank for olive oil. This is the third largest ingredient, and it was always clear with the history of the family, it has to come from the Holy Land. And initially, Israel was the thinking, but you don't really need fair trade in Israel, right? The group that needs support are the Palestinians in the West Bank. And ultimately, the formula was the vast majority comes from a fantastic project in the West Bank called Canaan, Palestine. And then some of the oil comes from sources in Israel. One is fair trade, and the others are organic farmers. One of them is actually related to the family distantly. So we had a great set of companies that produced organic and fair trade raw materials. And that's how it really started. And the book is just about all the trouble we had to go through, because this isn't so easy. Hardly anybody does that. And to make it clear, we're not just buying from projects. We actually set these up. We operate them. We have teams on the ground, and we support them initially financially. Of course, you have to make an investment, and then operationally, we're very much involved still to different degrees. The ultimate goal is to have teams on the ground that can do without a lot of support from our end. Plus, it shouldn't just be, say, coconut oil, but we're now expanding into coconut milk, coconut chips. In Ghana, it's no longer just palm oil, it's also cocoa that goes into our chocolates. We're now planning to do cassava flour because there's demand for that. So we're diversifying, and why we want those projects to be stable and ultimately not just rely on Dr. Bronner's as a single company, as a single customer, right? So we've found customers, there's a couple of German companies with good reputation that buy from us. So I find myself now selling, palm oil and coconut products and cassava flour, and I really like it because I believe in the products. Or we're starting to supply from India.
Hey, Gero, just
go ahead.
really quick though, that sounds crazy. Why would anybody grow palm, cocoa, cassava, and banana all together? How does that make sense?
This leads. So David prompts me here. So this is the question of DAF, mixed dynamic agroforestry, right? So this is he took a leap on the shift to regenerative agriculture, right? And it's in the beginning, once we realized, boy, these guys don't use chemicals anyways, so what's now organic about it, right? And very early on we said, no, these guys don't do anything to the soil. We started making compost. This was in Sri Lanka. We had our own compost plants, and the same we started doing in India, because you cannot just tell farmers not to use fertilizer and chemicals. Their yields will drop depending on what the crop is. So you need to support them with maintaining productivity with natural means, right? So in Sri Lanka, we started making compost. In Ghana, we started mulching. But once we got into cocoa, you realize farmers spray pesticides. They actually get it from the government for free. And then we thought, what do you do in order to make that cocoa more sustainable? And then regenerative agriculture came around in 2015. David picked up on it. Agriculture that goes beyond just not fertilizing and not spraying. You have to actively take other means to regenerate the soil, to improve productivity, diversify your production. And so in the States, then regenerative agriculture became hot. And then we came across this concept of mixed agroforestry, dynamic agroforestry, multi-strata. So you plant on a grid, you plant cocoa and palm trees and fruit trees and bananas and cassava. You plant it such that neighboring plants, they benefit each other rather than competing. And that's actually pretty established. And in fact, that's a rather old tradition. People have moved away from to go into just simple monoculture plots. And it's just visually so convincing. So we met one of the guys, a German guy who's been practicing this for a long time. He came to visit Ghana. And then we were converted. After the night, he went through his PowerPoints and showed it to us. And then we thought, this will combine oil palm and cocoa, our two crops on the ground. And then it'll also allow it to squeeze in cassava as early crops, right? Before the canopy grows up. And then you can plant turmeric and ginger. All sounded much too nice to be true. But that's really the technique we've committed to. It's taken a while to get farmers to shift back to this more traditional style. It's more labor intensive to set up. You need to invest a little bit. So all that we do on the ground, right? We're getting grants from development agencies because you need to have some kickoff financing of that. But it's the technique that we think, it's one of the techniques we think is going to save the planet. And I'm only half joking, right? It's got beauty to it. It diversifies. It beats climate change a little bit by bringing in carbon back into the soil from the atmosphere. So this is something we've been promoting in Ghana for 4 years now. In fact, we just bought our first farm. Usually we only work with smallholders, right? That's our religion. We want to work with smallholders and make sure they can make money and support communities. We just bought for demonstration a 200-acre farm in Ghana. Some of it is oil palm, and the rest is going to be planted in mixed agroforestry. And if you look at the drone photos of those plots, it's just a structured jungle, right? From above, it's super green. It's mostly the bananas in the first few years, but it's just very well planned. But then it turns into a jungle because trees just grow really fast in the tropics. Some potential for that in the United States too. We just visited a project in Germany where they're doing the same. So this is one of many techniques to use regenerative agriculture. This is for tree crops mostly. And field crops, in Ghana, in India, where we grow the peppermint, it's a little different there. You need to apply compost, you grow cover crops, you do crop rotation, you change your tilling schemes, etc. So for each situation, you have different techniques, but dynamic agroforestry, perma is just the most beautiful and the most promising. But to get the world to shift to it, it's probably going to take longer than I'll stick around on the planet. But it's just one of the real cool things, and there's just so many people engaged. It's one of the hot things. This mixed dynamic agroforestry is something that has just disciples all over the place. It's really fun, and it's the beauty of it, right?
Yeah, and it's incredible. And I just wanted to point out that palm and cocoa are two of the world's most problematic crops as they're generally grown, and palm in Indonesia and Borneo, you're ripping up rainforest and destroying orangutan habitats and displacing farming communities and ripping up wetlands and oxidizing huge amounts of carbon to the atmosphere. It's just a nightmare. And then cocoa is generally grown in these dense monocultures in West Africa or Central America. And West Africa produces the most premium cocoa beans, so Ghana and Ivory Coast. But it's so super insecticide intensive because it's so crammed, the way that the trees are grown so close together, and the prices that pay to farmers are so low that they're basically forced to rely on child slavery. So we're showing in this project, and what our farmers are doing, farming partners, is that when you plant these two crops that are generally grown in a terrible way, there's nothing inherently bad about palm or cocoa. There's nothing inherently good about hemp. It's all about the management approach to a given crop. It can be good, it can be regenerative and organic, or it can be totally industrial, chemical intensive, degenerative. So it's about the management approach, which basically is what we learned from hemp. And we bonded on hemp. Hemp, is at the nexus of drug policy reform and sustainable agriculture. And Gero is always this voice of reason and a movement. And we're all like, hemp can save the world, it can do every single thing but better. There's not one other crop can beat hemp at anything, you know. But
Wait a
eventually
minute,
we
you
realized
can't
that,
smoke
hemp's
it.
awesome. Yeah.
You can, but
Yeah.
the usual stuff you grow just doesn't do much for you.
Yeah. But that was the point
So
too.
it
I
doesn't.
mean, look,
So
we're
it
definitely
doesn't do
activists
everything.
on drug policy reform. Yeah.
It's this is
No, you're right.
that's just one thing. Industrial hemp really doesn't really get you too high. But most of the
Yeah,
things
I mean,
you
Gero
can do
smoked like huge joints of it. He could just
mild,
didn't
big,
get high at
just
all.
for self-experimentation, and it didn't do anything to me. It was really interesting. So the hemp got us together, right? And hemp is super symbolic. And I had already through friends who actually grew and processed it, and they almost bankrupted. And so I had a reality check on hemp, and then I met David, and David was, yeah, hemp is going to save the world. And so we had a lot of chats about this, and it was just great to see David respond. So these are the jokes we're making oftentimes. So we came together through one particular crop and its promise, and then we took on oil palm and cocoa, who are just really nasty crops, but the reality is they're not. It depends on how you grow them. Oil palm oil, as David says, is just often done in the most stupid and most destructive way, but you don't need to do that. You just work with smallholders, you help them improve the fertility, you pay properly, and it's usually small plots. It's 5 acres, right? It's not 10,000 acres, right? So that makes a huge difference. And the same with cocoa. So it's mostly, there is economics, it's poor maintenance also of cocoa trees in Ghana. So helping farmers to prune, to thin out, for instance, sounds trivial, but it's not. It's a lot of work, and that's what you want to support. And that by itself is going to improve income, and the child labor is a function of the economy. It's not that, it's mostly actually not slavery. It's mostly farmers who take their kids to work because they don't have the money to engage contractors. So we know this because we've been on the ground for 10 years now. And so to practice this and also to educate people about how to grow these fantastic crops. Palm is a fantastic crop. It just depends on how you grow it as to whether it's beneficial or detrimental. And the same is true for cocoa and any other crop, including hemp. So this is one of the big lessons I think we learned in the process. It's about how you grow it, and fair trade, same thing. It's not just about paying a little more. It's engaging with communities and help farmers improve the economics of the crop by supporting more productive soils, for instance. And that all sounds very simple. It's not. It's a lot of work, and you have to change habits, and farmers usually aren't that fast in changing habits. And that's the same all over the planet. So that's ultimately what we do. We're on the ground and try to get farmers to go back to practices that are older, but a little more organized, a little more planned. And I think that's going to be our trip for the, whatever many years. It's just to support farmers in improving and then telling the stories, and in the meantime also support communities in addressing other social issues. Right now, the big thing we're starting with is helping collect plastic waste, because towns in developing countries typically have poor trash collection, and so they're just littered with plastic bags. We occasionally pick them up before the Christmas party, but that doesn't do anything, right? So you need to establish collection, and then you need to establish recycling. And there's now a trend for companies in the West to clean their own plastic footprint by supporting the cleanup in developing countries. It's a growing trend, and we like doing this because just taking out plastic bags off the street in Ghana and India makes a huge difference, and you can make a little bit of money even, and you turn it into granules, use it in road construction, etc. So that's the stuff we look at as part of our fair trade mandate, is just to help improve the places where we work in, right? We're there a lot. You work very closely with the communities, and it's kind of fun. You have a reason to be there because you run a company. NGOs do that, and it's fantastic. What's nice about our work is you buy from people and you employ them on fair terms, and that creates a somewhat different relationship with them. And like I said, I was always skeptical of business. I really like it because it gives you an excuse, a reason to be somewhere and engage with communities. And the locals sometimes wonder what are the white guys doing there. And after about 2-3 years, they usually find out what your intentions are. You just say what you want to do, and then you do it for a number of years. And it's not easy. There's still, lots of funny ideas that people have oftentimes, and there's all kinds of infrastructure stress. But to be on the ground and engage is ultimately what we're doing. And we just hope it spreads, or at least it sets an example. That's one reason I wrote the book, is just to show that this can actually be fun. It's a lot of sweat and tears, but it's great enjoyment too. You're muted, Trish.
What? Shoot. Okay, so let me ask, or just clarify. So you use the term smallholder, and that means a farmer that has a small amount of land that they're farming. Is that correct? Like maybe 5 acres kind of thing, or not a lot.
2 to 10 acres is common, varies. Coconut land, a little bigger, but in Ghana, it's typically around 5. Is common. In India, it's even less. It's often, the individual plots are less than an acre oftentimes. And so people that draw a good chunk of their income from farming and are usually held hostage by pricing and the fact that they can't really invest. Farmers are really cash poor, and getting credit, getting loans in developing countries is usually impossible. It's really difficult. So for us to come in, so it's the bank of Dr. Bronner's. Oftentimes you kick things off, you provide advances, for instance, depending on what the need is. So those are the smallholders. This is our audience, because they account for a huge share of the world's production of food, but their needs are under-recognized and not well supported, and oftentimes simply by shifting to chemical-intensive agriculture or GMO or whatever it is. And we just think there's a different way of doing it, but it's pretty labor-intensive and it takes commitment. And I think that's our trip ultimately, is to show on the ground. And it's not that easy to shift farmers to organic. You do need to support. It doesn't happen overnight. And even if you pay a premium, that's not enough. You need to train and support and make compost and whatnot. So engaging there is really important.
And I just wanted to make a couple comments here as well, and on all the amazingness that Gero's helping manifest with our farming community partners, and that it's such a huge accomplishment that we get to go to market in partnership with these farming communities, and our success really translates to all kinds of amazing things happening. Gero was talking about some of those programs, and it could be equipment for the hospital, or for the schools, or a bridge, or just whatever the community needs and prioritizes and chooses themselves in their own democratic process that we have we're involved in but do not control. But I did, Gero pointed out one of the really good projects here is like picking up all that trash, plastic that's just out and about in the environment. And I wanted to note that, obviously in Bronner's, we sell our liquid soap in plastic bottles. It's an ongoing challenge to figure out a solution to that. Just wanted to share some of it. We were the first to do 100% post-consumer recycled PCR in our bottles, and that was, I don't know, almost 15 years ago or something. Unfortunately, we haven't, compostable bottles isn't really an option. They're where you see them, they're in like single-use service, kind of, like a water bottle or a compostable, whatever, utensils kind of thing, where it's like you use them once and you throw it away. Unfortunately, there's an inherent, conflict between biodegradability and shelf stability. And with our soap, our soaps are in a shower for like 3 months in the sun and water, and so these compostable bottles, like, they just disintegrate in like 5 days. I mean, they're just not. It's not really an option. So we're trying to figure things out, and some of the new initiatives that we've got are really going to be ramping up our refill program, where retailers can mail back the 5-gallon, and we'll just like refill it and just keep the 5 gallons, and encouraging our end customers to go refill at stores. Same thing with drums. There's these new drum shops kind of coming up. So encouraging our customers to do that. And then we're kind of finishing a detailed analysis of a refill container, either aluminum versus a paperboard that's FSC certified with a little bit of a plastic liner that's also coming from FSC certified timber. We're going to do a real detailed analysis on, aluminum's going to have a big upfront kind of environmental impact, but theoretically is infinitely recyclable. But we got to deal with the reality of what is the actual kind of percentage, weigh that in the equation versus this paperboard that's coming from sustainable plantations. It's carbon neutral basically, but isn't it's not going to have that infinite recyclability. So that anyways, we're going to finish a detailed analysis and then basically sell a soap in one of these more recyclable fat. It's not like you can't have like a carton in your shower any more than really a compostable package, but you can refill the plastic bottle with that more sustainable packaging. So that's just so we are getting after it. We're not just saying like, yeah, we'll go help pick up trash over there, and then like we'll just coast on our plastic usage.
This is a super important point, right? And we're doing the same with carbon offsetting. The mandate is to first clean up your own house, right? And it's just to make changes in production, look at the packaging, and that it's not enough, and often it isn't, or there's just obstacles to doing this. Then you look for options to do something equivalent elsewhere. Make sure it's certified, so you don't just greenwash, in this case, what you do, right? So it's all complementary. So it's not a contradiction really between doing source reduction, is what David was referring to, and then whatever cannot be offset, you just do elsewhere in your project. So it's still within your own supply chain. And actually, my goal would be for Dr. Bronner's not needing any offsets, because there's other companies. This is really important. If all of our projects were just to serve Dr. Bronner's, they wouldn't be sustainable, right? You need other customers. So there's companies who are looking for such offsets for plastic. It's a global movement, right? And you can sell those. My preferred customer, of course, is Dr. Bronner's, but if all the measures that David has in mind ultimately knock out our plastic footprint, I'll be glad to sell the offsets to Unilever or somebody else. This is the nice thing. I really like the openness of this. That's what I like. That's the one thing I like about capitalism. You want to be a little flexible and look around. And there's many companies who like what we do. Right? So it's several approaches. You can't have a single approach to solving those huge problems. And I think plastic one, and then emitting greenhouse gases is another one. And those, you just need to look at a multi-pronged approach to address those. And it's kind of nice that Dr. Bronner's has in its own supply chain a couple of options. They don't cover everything, but a couple of options to offset carbon by growing trees, so to speak, to produce coconuts and palm fruits, or compost in India, or on the plastic, same things. You just take it out of the environment elsewhere. So it's kind of nice to have your own inset opportunities to clean up what you still cannot clean up yourself as much as you try to.
So one of the things that I noticed when reading your book and listening to you talk is that your company has a very holistic to who you are contracting with, say to do your growing, and that you give a lot of support, not just support in the growing itself, but in the community, which really helps that to be successful in the long term, the sustainability portion of it. I'm saying
and that's the original fair trade mandate. This when we started again, we thought fair trade is mostly just about paying better prices. That's one big element of it, but better yields are actually more effective in improving income. And then you also look at needs in the communities you work at, and that's very fulfilling. It takes a while for the farmers to agree, right? There's, you deal with multiple towns, for instance, villages. There's conflicts, everybody sees there's some money coming in, who gets to be picked first. So it's somewhat of a democratic process to figure out what projects can you execute with a limited budget. Say in Sri Lanka, annual budget, fair trade premium, 200 to 250K. You get a lot done. You need to do that in a thrifty fashion. You need to control the contractors. You need to make sure there is no money wasted. And so that's been a great experience, is to engage in the community to tackle some of the issues they have. Or then sometimes we build a maternity ward in Ghana, which was really needed. The fair trade premium wouldn't have gone far enough, right? So Dr. Bronze, we actually did a crowdfunding. This was a few years ago, to first buy mosquito nets for distribution. And then there was money left over because we were really good in raising money. Dr. Bronze kicked in another 30 grand. So for 80,000, we built a maternity ward. Not so bad. So that's the kind of stuff you do. You look opportunistically as to what's needed, and then you look for funding. We did the same with Corona now in India, right? We had 2 waves of serious trouble. Initially, there was a need last year to distribute emergency foods for farm workers who were not allowed to go on the field, but had no reserves. Right, so Dr. Bronner's kicked in 25K, and then we organized food distribution with the partners on the ground. And then the next round, earlier this year, we raised some money from industry to support, actually with prevention, medicinal herbs that are a little expensive for Indians, and distribute those, and then also put in some ventilators, right? So you always need to look at what's needed, and then you find ways to do this cost effectively, right? You don't just want to pour money in there. You need to make sure that people know that there's limited funds and that they use that to execute such projects cost effectively. That's actually the big fun, is just to get a lot done with just a few grand.
Well, it sounds like you've done quite a bit in everything that you've been doing. Talk about the word serendipity and how that helped to inform the names of some of your projects. Can you elaborate for me?
Yeah, this was a beer idea David and I had. I think this was in Sri Lanka. So the first company we founded there was owned 75 by Dr. Bronner's, and then the local partners had equity, and we didn't have a good name. And then, well, number one, the Arab name for Sri Lanka is Serendip. So that links to the concept of serendipity. The Arabs must have found it by accident. You know, it's an island after all. And we just liked it because the whole project came about by serendipity. You know, there was a tsunami. Then I had found Gordon and Sonali, our partners, not by chance, but I would have never met them if I hadn't gone there and worked on this project. And so we were just sitting and thinking, what's the name for the company? So we said Serendipol, because pol is the Sinhala name for coconut, right? So we said, this is the coconut you come across by serendipity. And then the reality is, it's not like we sat down one day in 2005 and said, okay, we do coconut oil in Sri Lanka, and then we do palm oil in Ghana and mint oil in India. Nothing like this. Much of the plan, we always knew what we wanted ultimately, which is to have fair and sustainable, regenerative later on, ingredients. But how exactly to get there, nobody knew, right? And much of it was serendipity. It's the people you meet, it's the advisors you find, it's ideas that come across your way. And one could also call it opportunistic, but that doesn't sound as good as serendipitous. But it's really it's the concept of openness to opportunities. And I had the same talk yesterday on a podcast interview. And, you know, opportunism has a bad taste, but it usually involves compromising on your values. But there's nothing wrong with being opportunistic, because it simply means you go for an opportunity, things that present themselves to you, and then you run really fast. But it does not involve compromising on your values whatsoever. But serendipity sounds better, but it's somewhat of the same, right? You need to run for opportunities. And this is really how we operate. There's so many good ideas that come our way by serendipity. You have to have a wide radar. You have to be open and then see whether it fits in with your values. And then you need to run really fast. And that's really the principle that I'd say all of our projects are based on. And you need partners that are open to this, right? They can't be concrete brains, so to speak. They need to be open to opportunities. And I really like that. It keeps you on your toes. And it also makes you scan the world and look at what's out there, how can you fit in there, make links, and then just grow what you do. So serendipity has been one of the guiding principles. It usually shows up. You just have to watch for it.
So tell me, what's next? What are you going to be expanding into more into some different areas?
I'd say in terms of new projects themselves, we got 4 now that we operate that are growing and are getting bigger. And then we got a couple of very close projects, such as the olive oil project in the West Bank, which we don't own. So we have operational responsibility for 4 projects. And India, that has fantastic potential in that they grow 3 crops and they can grow. This is up in Uttar Pradesh, east of Delhi, flat land, and not so bad, but very low on humus. So you can grow almost anything there. So medicinal herbs are just a staple there, such as tulsi, which over the last couple of years in the United States became super hot as an immune system boosting agent. So there it's really about diversifying their 3 crop a year rotation, so the farmers can fetch an organic premium for what they grow, because you can keep farmers only organic if they can make money of it, right? But if Dr. Brown just buys one of the 3 crops, the mint, it may not be good enough. So diversification of the outlet is one of the mandates. So that's the one thing we do in India. We just keep adding farmers as our own demand for mint oil grows. At the same time, you need to find customers that buy. And so there you find at a trade show, you run across Gaia Herbs, one of the great high quality makers of nutritional supplements. And they have started buying tulsi from us. They buy chamomile. And now we're just talking about all kinds of crops that already are grown, and to do those in regenerative agriculture. Or a great German customer is interested in peanuts, which you can also grow in northern India. You have to get the quality right. And so it's diversification. That's one of the key things. Then in Ghana, through the dynamic agroforestry, we'll now have more and more cassava. So there's huge demand for cassava flour as a gluten-free flour in crackers and cookies in the United States. So we're talking to brands that have an interest in regenerative cassava flour. And so it's about expanding the realm of products you offer to consumers in the US, but also in Europe. So that's one way to grow. And then it's just furthering the techniques, the mixed dynamic agroforestry, to just roll this out more and more. So those are essential issues. And then you just pick up on the site what's there, such as the plastic project, which if it works well in Ghana, we'll do the same in India. And I don't see this stop anywhere, because you look at this, and there's in India, for instance, groundwater is a real problem, right? Just like in the Central Valley, right? Just way overdrawn for irrigation. The farmers do this because they don't pay for the water. It's really bad. You can't blame them, but the soil doesn't hold water all that well. So using humus to increase water absorption, cut irrigation needs by that, and thereby sparing the groundwater. That's the next big front almost anywhere. So as we do regenerative agriculture, you just tackle some of the critical things communities all over the planet are facing. And then education is important. So in Ghana, we're now building a Montessori preschool for some 150 kids, because education, stimulation of preschool kids is just a huge need anywhere on the planet. And since we're on the grounds, we already have the kids, right? It's the kids of our workers. We got 350 staff at that operation. It's not a small operation anymore. And many of them are unskilled women or semi-skilled. They've got kids to take care of. So to offer that as a service and have kids that develop. Will they ultimately stay in town and become farmers? Who knows? But that's not ours to judge, but to help stimulate kids and train farmers. That's one project we're doing. It's construction of a school and a meeting center with matching funding from the German government. So there's just a whole bunch of things here and there. And of course, we do propaganda. Public education is the better word. The book is part of it. It's speaking at events to get the word out. That's a big part of what my special operations team and I do, is just to educate industry, the public, on the opportunities that are out there. So that's just what I see in the next couple of years ahead of us. The chocolate is a great example of that, how we use our own products to exemplify the concept of regenerative agriculture. We wouldn't have gotten into chocolate if it hadn't been for the fact that we were in Ghana and are learning how to produce regenerative cocoa. Should mention that, David was very involved in helping create the standard, a certification, the Regenerative Organic certification, to make sure that claims of regenerative are not just claims, but they're backed up by reality. And as much as I dislike certification, it's a lot of work. It often distracts from what you need to do, but you need standards in order to keep companies from green and fair washing, right? So we do support the development of the standard. We talk about regenerative agriculture, and to me, it's really nice to see how in Germany, there's been biodynamic agriculture, comes from Germany and Switzerland ultimately. But it's really nice to see that the younger generation of farmers or entrepreneurs in Germany, they take the concept of regenerative. They pick that up, and the term speaks to many people more than organic or fair trade. It's more meaningful. Regenerative is more comprehensive. It includes fairness, soil development, but also animal welfare. And it's really nice to see that in Germany, where I'm pretty often, people also start realizing, well, this is a great concept. And so there's groups of farmers, professional farmers, that become regenerative now, try to figure out what to do and to interact with them under very different circumstances. It's a little colder, the soil is different, and it's really fun to be a little part in this global movement to link up practitioners and not just talk about things, right? And since we do this in the jungle, we have somewhat of a standing. And it's really fun to visit regenerative farms in Germany, which we just did. So all that is going on at the same time. Much of it is really education, and then it's expanding the existing projects. But there's also new ones that come on board, right? There's a great project that makes avocado oil in Kenya, also organic and fair trade. So we're switching as these projects come up, we're switching to them and supporting them in their development, for instance. And ultimately, our goal is to have the vast majority of our ingredients be regenerative. It may not happen until I die, but that's ultimately the vision, is just to get all of our major and even the minor ingredients to come from sources that are beneficial to people, communities, and the soil, right? It's sort of our goal, and it's far, but we've made huge progress and have covered all of our major ingredients. Now we're down to the minor ones, the smaller oils and essential oils. And so we've got lots of work to do for the next years.
Yeah, and I just wanted to speak a little more to the Regenerative Organic standard. I mean, it's no small feat that these sister projects are certified regenerative organic. And to what Gero was talking about, is regenerative as a term is fast becoming as meaningless as sustainable. And we saw early on that we needed to put a high bar certification standard behind this term to keep it meaningful, or at least within the certified usage. And regenerative organic was very important, because a lot of regenerative, like you'll see Monsanto using regenerative language. And what they mean by that is herbicide tolerant GMO crops that you can blast huge amounts of 3 different kinds of herbicide that will sell you, and and then do no-till, and somehow, and then a huge amount of synthetic nitrogen. That's the largest greenhouse gas contributor in industrial agriculture. Like somehow this is all regenerative,
Yep.
just because they didn't plow or disturb the soil, and that's like, it's ridiculous. So regenerative organic, it basically is, Gero mentioned biodynamic, really recognizing biodynamic, looks at a farm as an organism, a living organism. It's about building fertility on the farm, not just exporting a bunch of off-farm inputs. I mean, that's necessary, but if you do that, it's necessary at times. And when you do that, make sure it's like compost from sustainable compost sources. So it's all like basically, if the whole world were regenerative organic, it would be this not just carbon neutral, but we would be actually sequestering atmospheric carbon into the ground, into the soil at scale. It would be one of our #1 strategies to actually mitigate climate change, and just through the normal processes of photosynthesis, and takes carbon dioxide and makes the carbohydrates, and makes the root shoots and leaves. 20 to 40% of that is exudated into the soil to feed the symbiotic microbiota, the mycorrhiza, all the fungus systems, and just essential for healthy crop and plant growth. And what we've done with industrial agriculture is basically, and in that process, carbon will form into long-term recalcitrant carbon, humus. Gero mentioned humus, which is also very good at retaining water. What Gero was saying, like, in this, more and more climate, weather, extreme weather, more drought, that actually putting carbon into the soil. Not only is that a potential strategy at global scale, really mitigating climate change, but you're actually drought-proofing your soil, so you can handle these huge rain events. It's not going to wash your topsoil away. Yeah, it'll infiltrate and be stored in there. And yeah, so anyway, so regenerative organic, the certified standard, it's all about that, but then it's also about people. What Gero's in, like, to us, it's like you need to also be focusing on the farmers, the prices they're getting, on the workers, like the conditions and the wages they're getting. This is very important for a holistic certification standard that's really addressing everything that's important in agriculture.
Yep.
And then the final dimension there is animals. So any livestock that are involved, like, they should be never in a confined system. It should be pasture-based only, so like grass-fed beef and pasture-raised pigs and chickens. I'm personally vegan since 1996, but recognize and in solidarity with high animal welfare, pasture-based livestock operators against the factory farm machine that's eating us for lunch. So we don't have, livestock isn't a part of our operation, but it is an important part of the regenerative organic standard and the ethic behind it. So you're basically taking the best of the soil health, fair labor, and animal welfare movements as applied to agriculture into one single standard. So you don't have to look for different certifications. It's like a single standard. And yeah, it's high bar. It's difficult. It's not easy. Has a bronze, silver, gold levels to it. And so Dr. Bronner's, like, we were able to leverage Gero and his team's extensive expertise to partnership with Rodale, the kind of the godfather organization of the organic movement in the United States. Biodynamic also was involved in early stages.
You're a little low on volume, David. Can you speak up a little, David? You're somewhat low.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know. Do I hold the phone closer? Is that better?
Yeah, that might work.
Maybe I'm not coming through. Okay.
Yep.
Anyways, that was a long.
Better.
I'm babbling on a long time. Anyways, a very, very awesome standard, and Patagonia is a partner, Rodale, Compassion Road Farming. So you'll start seeing this certification in stores soon. And Serendipity, our sister coconut oil supplier in Sri Lanka that Gero was talking about, was the first certified regenerative organic, and so the VTO is regenerative organic certified, and we're really proud of that, and hope to see many other brands, or actually we know many other brands are about to also certify. Nature's Path has got some oatmeal that they're certifying regenerative organic, and Guayaki, and just a lot of other cool brands. Lotus Foods, Lotus is doing sustainable rice intensification. which is amazing. Much less water is used, much higher yields per acre for pretty much the world's most important crop by caloric, I guess, production. And yeah, so anyways, just really psyched that we're able to help build that standard and then certify it to something that is really meaningful. And hopefully we're seeding the future of agriculture. Like Gero says, it's not probably going to be happening here, and unfortunately, well,
It's you don't know.
2040, maybe we integrate all our psychedelic allies, all of our plant medicines are moving. Everyone's waking up. I don't know.
We're doing this holistically, Trish, and David, like passed the ball here. It's clear that the few projects we have were nothing compared to the big guys, the Cargills and the ADMs or what were nothing. But we're innovative and we create a desire. So smaller companies start looking at regen. They start using the term. You have to watch that a little bit. But the idea we're pushing appeals to almost everybody, even to Monsanto. Unfortunately, they abuse it really badly. But we're part of a movement, and of course, it can only survive if the economics work out. Right? So that's the real challenge we have. But it's also the willingness of brands to even pick it up, and that's nice to see that brands start looking for regenerative because there's an appeal to it. And there's a lot of details to work out and where can you put the label, etc. But there's I find a genuine interest among many of the growing younger American brands, genuine interest to source from regenerative sources. And somehow, that's been around with organic and organic growth, but organic, many people don't even know what it means anymore. And it's lost some of its power. And I have a strong sense that regenerative speaks to people. And what's really fun to watch is that in the press, and it's here and in Germany too, just all these experiments in mixed agroforestry or in improving soil, that makes it onto the first page of the New York Times, or there's articles in Germany in the Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung where politicians talk about, I think we forgot the smallholder farmers worldwide. After all, they're our foundation, and you don't want to leave this to big companies. So there's really inspiring articles. Are they going to translate into policy? Who knows, right? Politics is not so much fun to watch, and in Germany it's also difficult. But I do have a hope that just the increasing amount of disasters, you don't want to wait for disasters, but it's also increased levels of education and motivation, inspiration, in particular among the younger crowds. The people in their 20s and 30s I meet here and in Germany. There's just so much desire to do work that has meaning and purpose, right? That's meaning and purpose is is tried now, but it's true. I work only because I want to do something with meaning and purpose. Otherwise, I just go play golf. And that is just not so much fun, and most people feel the same way. So it's for us, and Dr. Bronner's work does this in general, whether it's David's activities in, for instance, recognizing the therapeutic force of psychedelics, for instance, which is a hot topic, is just to get after ideas that have been out there and to support them in your own circles and hope that others pick up, right? It's just help building critical mass. I think that's what we do for a living at Dr. Bronner's. And it's pretty unique honestly, we try to pick up cool ideas that have potential and build with allies critical mass. That's just our mode of operating. And that is just the funnest thing you can do with a medium-sized and pretty solidly growing company, I think.
Well, I think I have to say I'm really just completely impressed with what your company has done with regenerative farming, and this ethical supply chain. That it's really working. so that it is possible to do these improvements and to have a more holistic view and really walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Yep.
So we're appreciating that very much. And I want to see if, I think we're pretty much we've gone over a little bit of our hour that we thought we were going to do, but I'd like to just invite you both to share what you'd like to kind of conclude with for our little talk today. I know I'd like to say, make sure that you buy a copy of Honor Thy Label, because it really gives all the information that we're talking about in much more detail. And it's really a blueprint. What I got out of it was really a blueprint on how to do what you're doing. So you're really like, sharing kind of as a almost mentoring people who would like, or companies who would like to follow in your footsteps.
David, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think enshrining your values early on is key. Just really understanding money is energy, and not, forming a team that has a similar view and are willing to basically, work for a company that's not necessarily going to be paying, the super massive wages at the top. Although we are generous at the bottom and mid-levels, but really are, mission aligned. And I would say, so make sure you've got the right people, and then cap your salaries. I mean, I think that's really a key thing that we did to just enable profits not to get sucked away. I think a lot of companies just suffer from profits getting eaten up in bonuses and whatnot. And I think that cap has been really crucial, and I think other companies that's wise to put in place. And have sustainable margins in your business. Be able to do all the right things and communicate with your customers, and in an effective way. But what we've really proven, I think, is that our advocacy, and really centering advocacy in our business model, and communicating about it, but fighting to win, whether it's a regenerative organic issue, or on a drug policy issue, or an income inequality issue, that we get a lot of attention. And I think other businesses have shown that when you build an ethical model like a Guayaki that makes yerba mate, or Equal Exchange, or the Real Fair Trade, that there's a real market of consumers that wanna support and buy products from brands and companies where they know it hasn't gone to hell and back, and that the people aren't being exploited, that all the labor, all the human involved are being respected and rewarded, not exploited, and that the land is being regenerated. And so I think this is what we're doing is, I think, and we want to first, we're emulating others, some of the Real Fair Trade organic pioneering companies, again, like the Equal Exchange. But we're part of a wave that's hopefully going to really inspire a whole other generation and a whole new wave of companies to kind of do this, centering activism and social and environmental responsibility in a real way, not just in a PR kind of greenwashing way. So
that's really for companies, that people need to realize that you have to be generous, and the Bronners do this par excellence. You just don't take a dividend and you cap your salaries. That just leaves so much money. And I've been enough in the company meetings to watch how decisions are made. And if there's trouble, if you only look at the money side, you just can't be consistent in your goals. You have to look at the money. You need to be profitable, right? There's no way around that. But there's different ways of then dealing with the profit you hopefully make. And there is a range of things you can do with it. And whether you engage locally, not everybody uses tropical agricultural products, but there's lots of stuff you can do locally where you are, and just make that a priority. Commit yourself by essentially taking that money away from the owner. Not many owners like this. The Bronners are just a fantastic example of that. And with that money, you can, as if it was business, right? As if what we do in Ghana and Sri Lanka, that's part of our business. And if you incorporate this into your business, the results will look rather different than if you only look at how you make money. And then look at your team, your staff as a resource, and remember they want to be motivated. Not everybody ticks the same way David and I may tick, for instance. Right? You have to look at how do you motivate people to do things so they see meaning and purpose in what they do. And it's intrinsic motivation, I've learned. This is the one big power tool, is see how you can motivate people, and they will just perform like you would not believe it, and help you get towards a goal. So these are the things I've learned with the teams on the ground. And I think this for everybody. There's room to practice this at home, so to speak. So I hope this comes out of the book a little bit.
Yes, it most certainly does come out. It certainly, that reading your book certainly inspired me to do more in my community and in my own business.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that this would be inspirational for others too. So I think this is a really, it's a good tool to
Cool.
get started with it. Thank you both for being here, David Bronner and Gero Leson. Please, I should say I do hope that people watching will read your book, because I think it can make a big difference, and I see our younger generation as being the ones to carry this on for us. So
thanks for giving us an opportunity to talk to your local customers and for people online. Thanks a lot. Great talk. I really enjoyed it.
Yes, thank you guys both very much. We're going to sign off now, and I look forward to I look forward to hopefully meeting you in person someday, both. And you're both welcome to come and visit anytime. I'll give you a free Steinbeck tour.
That's actually what got me interested. First, I thought, oh, this is the Steinbeck city. I have to go. I've been to the museum, but it's been a few years. So next time I drive down to Central California, I'll come by, Trish, for sure.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you both, David Bronner. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll look forward to more good things coming from Dr. Bronner's.
There will. Stay tuned. Thanks very much, Trish. Take care.
Thanks. You guys
Take
too.
care. Bye-bye.